Morning, everyone. Thank you for everyone for joining us today. Thank you to ESI. Thank you to my esteemed panelists. Just a quick introduction into what we're going to be talking about today. We'll be talking about the evolution of esports sponsorship. Very briefly going back in time, about 10 years ago, a quick assessment of what the landscape looked like from a pure esports sponsorship and partnership perspective. Then going forward in time a little bit, talking about today, what does the landscape look like today, and then hopefully talk about the exciting bit, which is the future of esports sponsorship. Where is that going? Is there a glass ceiling? What's Guild and Fnatic's approach? What are they thinking, etc., etc. We'll start with some brief introductions. Craig.
Hi, yes, Craig Evanson. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Fnatic. It's great to see everybody here.
Hi guys, I'm Nick Westwood. I'm Director of Content and Creative for Guild Esports. Standing in for Rory, our Head of Commercial today. He's playing golf. Can you believe that? Taking a week to play golf. But hopefully I can answer some questions and answer the questions we put forward.
Thank you. A brief introduction from my side. My name is Raphael, or Raf for short. I work for SPORTFIVE, a global sports marketing agency working with primarily traditional sports teams such as Chelsea Football Club, Ferrari F1, LA Lakers, LA Dodgers, but very much a huge footprint in esports as well. So about 5 or 6 years ago is when we sort of started out working very locally over in Germany with teams like Unicorns of Love and SK Gaming, but has since grown out to be now a global powerhouse, over 80 people dedicated just to esports and gaming, working with Riot Games and the LEC exclusively, working with Fnatic exclusively, now Guild as well, over in the US with Misfits and Immortals Gaming Club and Genji over in Korea. So huge footprint from an esports perspective. And yeah, today we'll be talking about the evolution of esports sponsorship. So allow me to take you back in time about 10 years ago. We predominantly saw just endemic brands entering the space. Teams, rights holders didn't really have the infrastructure required to deliver a holistic sponsorship solution. So you sort of saw things like naming rights deals being very prevalent. At some point, for those that have been in the industry for a long time, Fnatic was called Fnatic Raid Call or Fnatic MSI. It was a naming rights deal where a brand would pay money and essentially own the name of Fnatic for a period of time. Now, obviously, the industry has evolved, and back then, the infrastructure simply wasn't there. The teams didn't have the expertise required, and also the industry needed professionalizing and maturing. There simply wasn't, the industry wasn't there. The audience wasn't there. The viewing experience wasn't there. 10 years ago, Twitch wasn't even a thing. Twitch has only been a thing for about 8 years. It was first Justin TV, then turned into Twitch about 8 years ago. And since that point, we've now sort of seen a lot more growth, especially in the 5 or 6 years ago. We've seen people come over from the traditional sports side, coming onto esports and really leveling up when it comes to pure sponsorship and esports partnerships, which is super incredibly exciting. I think my first question, Craig, would be to you. When it comes to your background, especially in the Premier League, can you draw any parallels to the evolution of esports sponsorship and traditional?
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we start, is there a show of hands of who would classify themselves as a football fan in the room? Okay. Any Premier League team fans? Any season ticket holders at Premier League clubs? Okay, so there's a few of you. So thank you. You helped pay my mortgage for 14 years. I was at the Premier League between 2004 and 2018. There are a huge number of parallels in terms of the growth stage of professional sport and esports. I think going back to '92, that was the big moment for football when the Premier League was established in its current guise. The driver was to maximize revenue with relatively limited infrastructure, and it was built around endemic brands. So, for example, the Premier League put in place a title sponsorship with Carling, which is an English beer. That relationship carried over for about 10 years before Barclays came along. And it was really the growth of the eyeballs behind the league as an English league started to establish itself internationally, and Barclays, as an English bank, British bank, rode those coattails. The other area would be things like licensing deals with people like Nike with a ball, sticker books and collectibles, and even things like the letters and numbers on the back of shirts, where a licensing deal was put in place. And all of that happened over a 10, 15-year period once all the governance and the infrastructure for the league had been put in place. That feels like those days have gone for esports as well. And what it always comes back to is how do you, build an audience, how do you engage that audience, and how do you build a really successful ecosystem around it. And I think we'll probably talk about that more in greater depth on the panel, but the life stage is very much more mature than but the foundations are the same.
Excellent points, Craig. I think one of the things that esports has benefited from is the fact that traditional has gone through that same growth stage over a longer period of time, and football took 10, 15, 20 years to sort of get to this fully fledged professional stage, whereas esports, it's maybe done in a little bit shorter of a time, sort of 3 to 5 years, which I think we can thank traditional sports for that. Nick, in your experience from your sort of traditional TV background and programming, can you draw any parallels as well to how you've seen esports evolve from a content perspective, from a sponsorship perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about esports is that it's equally entertainment as it is sport. So we always try and talk about it as competitive entertainment, and that helps us when we have conversations with traditional brands and traditional media as well. But a lot of analogies have been said to me over the years with the UFC as an example of something that was difficult to explain to people, to understand to people, but the excitement of having what was essentially a new sport, brand new sport, and being able to control its destiny. And I think we are, the comparisons have been going on for 5 or 6 years, but I think we're just about getting there with that in the same way that sport evolved, because I think what happened there was they were able to, and are still able to, hold on to the things that make it unique, but also learn from traditional media, learn from traditional sponsorship plays, traditional ways of running media businesses to create a credible business and a credible conversation around that business that now is in the mainstream media. And I think, particularly not necessarily in the UK, but in European markets, the next stage for us is being credible to traditional media, and for traditional media to adapt to our sector as well. When that happens, I don't know whether you agree, but when that happens, certainly from a commercial perspective, more doors are going to open.
No, excellent points. And I want to fast forward to today. We're seeing world-leading brands, AAA brands entering this space now with, rights holders like yourself, with ASOS, most recently Coca-Cola with Guild, some excellent examples of these brands entering this space and really playing a pivotal role in it. There's some arguments to be made that teams, publishers, event organizers in this space are even leading the charge and innovating when it comes to delivering value to partners in the wider sporting industry. And this has all happened in a relatively short space of time. Naming rights, Fnatic MSI or Fnatic Raid Call 10 years ago is now almost unheard of. Maybe TSM FTX is the only example, or one of the few examples that is now sort of current, and this is a team that is doing that. But we've shifted away from that in terms of from team naming rights to things like naming rights for training facilities. I think the BMW training facility in Berlin with Fnatic is a great example of that. Guild, who are recently going to be launching at the end of this month their new HQ in Shoreditch in London with an unannounced naming rights partner there as well. I'd like to ask a question to Craig around this. What has allowed Fnatic to level up your partnership and sponsorship proposition over the years? What unexpected categories of brands have you sort of seen enter the space, and how has naming rights sort of played a role in some of these partnerships?
Sure, I think going back to the early days, it's very much about maximizing revenue without the infrastructure that's in place, and things like naming rights or title sponsorship is the obvious place to go, and that's what we just talked about what happened at the Premier League. But as that starts to mature, it becomes about optimizing your sponsorship portfolio, and the Premier League made that decision in the mid-2010s, which was off the growth of the audience. So basically, the audience became too big that there's not one brand who can actually get the return on investment across that. So you start to optimize the rights to build a bigger portfolio. It allows other brands to come in because they've got room to breathe, and they obviously want to differentiate themselves within that space. So the Premier League example is, Barclays Bank as the kind of dominant partner, and then you move into official partner program with companies like Coca-Cola and Cadbury's and Oracle on a data-driven approach. These are all big businesses that have started to look at marketing partnerships and to get under the underlying principles of how they build relevance and authenticity with the audience and the community. That's been the biggest change that I've seen and witnessed, and see that continues. The other part is the optimization of the rights between the leagues and the tournaments and the teams themselves. Naturally in the early days you've got a big cost base to put on major events in stadia, and ticket costs alone isn't necessarily going to cover that. And in the absence of media rights, that hasn't necessarily been built to the same extent that it has in sports, you've got to find other ways. But I think there's definitely got to be a drive where the teams and the leagues and the tournament organisers start to work together to see how they optimise that landscape. I think that's the kind of the key drivers from my perspective.
And a follow-up question to that: if you had to look at Fnatic's current partner family and portfolio of sponsors, what is the most surprising one, especially, again, drawing parallels to traditional? What is a brand that you might not actually see in sport that you have now seen in Fnatic?
Yeah, so I think the tipping point for us was when we started talking to ASOS. They don't have any history or heritage of investment in sponsorship. And I think that, for me, was the marker in the sand, which was actually they wanted to talk to us about a marketing partnership. They know that this is an incredibly difficult audience to reach. The starting point for esports is the problems that sport is trying to solve. And so when you start thinking about digital first audience, the creator economy, it's streaming first in a declining broadcast viewership market, that's what the conversation was built around. And for me, that was a level of maturity that was coming with the space. I think the other part to think about with a company like ASOS is that, and you asked about how Fnatic has leveled up its approach as well, is that as the industry starts to mature, I think what we'd all like to see is the support services, the agencies, all of the people within the economy start to come to the fore. What I've seen at Fnatic is that the speed of development in esports is, it's on a multiple of anything in sport. And consequently, Fnatic has established its in-house studios team. So content creation has been built from the ground up, from ideation to execution across all of these digital channels that we all know and love. But that's the starting point. What we don't necessarily have is critical mass with agencies and others in the space who can help deliver those solutions for brands and the partners. I mean, the simplest example would be in terms of level of maturity. We have lots of conversations with media agencies, and advertising agencies who are working with the biggest brands who are now starting to come into the space. The first thing is, let's do an ad buy. Let's go and buy some advertising on a platform like Twitch. Okay, that's a start. You dip your toe in the ocean. Then we want to build a little bit more authenticity with the community. Okay, let's go and partner with one of the tournament organizers or one of the major tournaments like the LEC. And then they start to get it's more advertising and a deeper engagement, but it's a neutral space to operate in because it's not centric around the particular fan base that a team has. But then it's about authenticity, relevance, and actually understanding and knowing that community. And I'd probably use the example of skateboarding and snowboarding from 20, 30 years ago. You had to be in that community to know what was happening. And Fnatic is in that space, and Fnatic can deliver those content solutions so it resonates with that audience, and that's why we do it. But over time, as it starts to mature, starts to become a bit more mainstream in terms of how it's perceived, then brands and agencies will obviously come on that journey with us, and I think that's going to be great and healthy for the whole industry, for the industry as a whole. And that's what we typically do is it's not necessary that there's a league partnership or a team partnership or a player endorsement that is right for everybody. But I think it's in everybody's interest that we try and help a brand identify their objectives, their strategy against the audience, and help them navigate the space, because we've probably all seen a few very high-profile brand disasters happen over the last few years where they haven't had the right advice or they haven't had the right creative solutions because they're not native to the environment. But I think that's going to change. And we want to be a part of that with the overall ecosystem as opposed to operating on our own.
Yeah, some excellent points there, Craig. I think especially from a expertise standpoint, the esports and gaming industry requires, a little bit of expertise, knowledge, and not all agencies, especially the bigger ones from a media perspective, have that knowledge and expertise. Nick, from your perspective, with Guild being a relatively new player in the scene, quickly established themselves within the UK and Europe, from your perspective, can you elaborate a little bit more on what's allowed you to bring, these world-leading brands like Coca-Cola and Samsung on board?
Yeah, no, Dave gave Rory a disservice yesterday by joking about him playing golf. He's earned his holiday. He's had a very, very busy 2 years, as you know. And I think, we launched as a business during COVID. And now we're going through that process of solidifying ourselves as an esports org. Really, the ethos behind our business is that, as we talked about earlier with the Premier League, how do we become a club? Not a team, not an org, but a club. A club that so many people want to be part of, because at the end of the day, the members of a club can go from, and we think of our followers as being a member of our club, right the way up to our pros, and everyone having the same treatment. That's a big process to go through, but it's something that the brands that we partner with completely understand and completely resonate with. And it's finding that language, I think, which is very difficult for us in esports because we've been in it for so long. Many people in our team much longer than me, and having our own language and our own conversation and our own ways and our own identity. But we have to find, the success we've had is finding ways to bring people on board with that by using language and using things that we can learn from traditional sports. And also, I think, things that we can all learn from to actually help us all be commercially more viable. And I think even just doing that little pivot for us has certainly helped us in the conversations, even with publishers, so that they understand what journey we're on and actually want to come on that journey with us. And I have been really impressed by the publishers in the last year. Some of the publishers that have traditionally been at arm's length, some of the publishers that are, some people may have said can be slightly difficult in teams. I think because teams are more open, publishers are more open, the formats are getting more palatable for people who are casual viewers. The way that the broadcasts are developing is really helping us. And so what I think our strength has been is having a really good, hardcore backbone of esports people, and we're now investing heavily in making sure that we are top tier from a performance perspective, and protecting our team, delivering for our team, giving them opportunities to develop, academy programs, grassroots programs, making sure that the brands understand the importance of esports rather than just branded content series or creator streams or things that in the past they could get their head around and were easy. And so that over a longer period of time, our big objective and what we've been talking to our partners with is, we want to be the equivalent of a Premier League club, but in the esports sector.
It's a very ambitious objective, and I mean, definitely something that is achievable, I think, within especially the next 5 to 10 years as the industry grows. Looking to the future, we've seen sort of a big wave of cryptocurrency partners coming on board with Fnatic, with Crypto.com, with Guild and Bidstamp. I'd like to ask my panelists, where do you see sort of the next cryptocurrency? What's the next category that is really going to make big waves in this space? Where's the potential in the future? Perhaps Greg?
I think this is is my mic still working? Yeah, okay. I think this is a really fascinating question space to explore. There's there's a couple of things when I have conversations with people in the industry or with brands or with agencies, and it normally takes two courses. One is, without giving away my age, it's my demographic and above, and I'll talk to them about mainstream media, audience engagement, consumption, etc. And it's the experience I had growing up, which is playing sport, it's going to stadia, it's traveling abroad with friends and family to enjoy their major international tournaments. It's watching it on broadcast TV like the BBC or Sky Sports. It's reading about it in the newspapers, and it's talking about it in the playground or at the water cooler. That is mainstream media for my generation and above. And the buyers in that space, the CMOs today, that's their experience, and it's very tangible. What's not tangible is for the other conversation I have, which is when I talk to people about mainstream media, mainstream consumption, etc. It's a completely different vibe. It's about streaming, Twitch, it's about YouTube, it's a digital first generation on social channels, it's about the creator economy, and it's all about how on earth do you reach this audience with a mainstream mindset. And the marketing directors that have taken a risk or a punt with their own careers, but also with a knowledge base which is founded in what the future looks like. People like the team we work with at ASOS, the team we work with at L'Oreal, they know what the future is. And these are really aspirational marketing leaders who are making these decisions. And either they're making the decision themselves because they've accelerated their careers, or they're influencing up the chain to the decision makers who might be in a different generation. And when you talk about what's the next cryptocurrency, I don't actually see it like that. I mean, there's always going to be a hot category, but I actually see the tipping point being when the decision makers are actually going to start to recognize and realize, and it's just a level of maturity that's going to come with the space. It's when they're going to start investing and they're at critical mass. And I feel we're at that tipping point now with what I've seen with the brands that are investing in our business and across the industry. There's still some relative conservative approaches, and the conservative approaches are normally, it's the sort of conversation I would have, which is my children are playing Minecraft, my niece and nephew are on Fortnite, the new community and the new playground is in that environment and that space because of connectivity and the like. It's either the direct conversation where people experience it themselves, or it's the indirect one through people that they know. That's the tipping point, and I think it will be mass engagement when people start to appreciate how they're going to engage this audience, as opposed to a specific category or territory or geography.
Yeah, I agree completely with all of that sentiment. I think we have a really unique sector here that people across the media landscape have been calling out for forever. Right? You have a very unique way of engaging with people, retaining them, converting them through gameplay. I think the mistake, I say this as a content person, as a lifer making content, I think people keep trying to make content and missing out on the fact that the most important thing that we have in esports is that people play games, and that you as a brand can engage with them doing something, not passively watching something. And then you can re-engage with them. So I think that any category, basically, is open. Because once you can allow people to understand that, they then see the value of that. Some of the biggest brands we're working with are looking at those low-level competitions as being the real power of that partnership, and how that can then convert and ladder up into association with their brand and conversion into sales. So I think that's really important, and I think the final thing, if I was to commit to a category, I think it is those traditional media players. I mean, I've worked on the sort of precipice of digital and TV for 10, 15 years, and we're just going through now with these big media brands what we went through 10 years ago with YouTube, where they sort of buried their head in the sands until it was too late. They've got much better at embracing digital, and I think the next big thing will be seeing those big media brands coming on board and going, how can we get involved? And I don't believe they'll be arrogant enough to think that they can just come in and own it. I think that they'll be looking to, and the great thing about this this landscape, but there are no media owners, so we can be, and we can work with them. So I think that's the most exciting part.
Excellent. We've got one final question before we have to close off the panel because we've been told to shut it off. But I'd like to one final question to the panel. The topic of Web3 is on the horizon. It's a buzzword that everyone likes to use, but I think fundamentally what it's about is putting ownership to the end user, right? Getting people to actually own their own data, et cetera, et cetera. From a Web3 standpoint and from an esports perspective, how does Guild see that playing a role within an esports and partnership proposition? And especially with Fnatic, with their recent membership program, also launched on blockchain technology, it'd be great to hear both your perspectives to close out the panel.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, as I sort of touched on earlier, we need many, many more ways to make money than just sponsorship. You know, it's crippling at times because, you know, we're looking at 80-90% of our industry being sponsorship-led, and it really has to be down much, much lower than that. So we need to find ways as a business to make money. Digital innovation will help us with that. And also, you know, if we continue with our plans around engaging with users through gameplay and affinity with our team and our club, then, you know, any innovation, any development, Web3 will help with that in terms of us being able to commercialize our user base.
So when I left the Premier League in 2018, I went to work for a tech startup called Swift out of California. They were valued at about $100 million when I started in their Series A, and when I left it was a unicorn a couple of years later. And the growth with a tech mindset and how technology is used to solve problems is the thing that I really bought into. And I absolutely love working in esports because of that. And there's a massive difference between the people in sport and esports in terms of the foundations of both their education, their mindset, and their approach to the future. I'll give you one little example. It would be, if I was still at the Premier League, we'd be looking, or a Premier League team would be looking to do a deal with the companies like Socios, who create membership programs with utility for a fan base. Fnatic's a tech-first business because the people are in there, they all come from STEM backgrounds. They all come from a digital-first mindset. We built our own. We built it on blockchain. We partnered with Crypto.com, who's our lead partner in this space, to take that to our audience. But we had a community. We've got a Discord channel. We actually asked our community what they wanted, and we created solutions for them by using technology. It was a means to an end to create a more vibrant output for our audience. And I think this is the biggest driver for esports, is that the talent base that is here and the problems that we can solve for brands, whether it's recruitment wars to try and find this talent because this is the place that they are, or whether it's that they want to differentiate themselves from their competitors early, like BMW did with us, to try and create that lifetime value with a consumer base that takes them from an 18-year-old all the way through their life and buying BMWs on that journey, whether it's a second-hand 1 Series today or maybe it's an executive car further on in life. That's the piece that I think is the key factor. So the other point to riff on here would be there's only so much teams can do themselves, and I think we've got to start in this space with membership programs. We want this to be a vibrant space. We've got an open door policy. Come and talk to us if we can help you to build your own community. The other part to this would be, how can we work as a collective? Because there are certain things, and I saw this at the Premier League, which was an absolute delight, is when it makes collective sense for teams to come together, the commercial opportunities are incredible. The Premier League did it with media rights before any other football league in the world. Now they're on a multiple of more than double what any other football league earns, and it's because they came together as a group. The other opportunity is things like collectibles and licensing deals. So if you think there's companies like Topps Merlin and Panini who created trading cards, those trading cards had to be physically printed. They had to be distributed via 50,000 retail outlets in the UK. But then the Premier League's fan base grew, and it started to get traction in places like China and India and the US, and the geographies and the distribution and operational challenges were insurmountable. and then blockchain came along, NFTs came along, and all of a sudden you got this ability to create a digital asset that you remove the distribution barriers, but you've got true ownership, you have scarcity, you can create a market, and all of a sudden, when the Premier League was operating with a collective of teams, because you can't do this on your own, you've got to have the league and the teams coming together, you've gone from, maybe a fan base in the UK of 10 million people to a global fan base of 1 billion with unique ownership around digital assets. That's where I see the opportunities, and that's why everyone is looking in this room. I hope you can come and have conversations with people like us at Fnatic, because that's where I see us going. Parting note, what I also enjoy is there's as many people in this room today listening to what people are talking about as they are over there networking. I'm going to hold my hand up. I barely know anybody in this space. Hopefully I've added a little bit of value to your experience, but I would love to spend some time with all of you and get to know you, because I've got my own learning journey to go on. I'm not a gamer by nature, not to the extent that the people in this room would be, but I would love to get to know you. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig and Nick, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening in. Round of applause for the panelists.